should also work for 10,000 users. How do I do it? By scaling, by vertically scaling, horizontally scaling. There are multiple concepts which you will, slowly understand. But now the problem is, if it is a monolith architecture, then if I have to scale the system, I have to scale the entire system. I have to scale user registration feature. I have to scale the OTP feature. I have to scale the hospital entry feature. I have to scale the vaccination registration feature. I have to scale everything. But the requirement was just to scale the user registration part. But since my architecture is a monolith architecture, I am forced to scale the entire system, which is basically costing me unnecessarily. I don't even want it, but I'll have to pay for it because of the deficiency in my architecture. So this fight between cost and efficiency and usability and scalability have always existed in the software world. That's exactly why people came up with architectures like microservices, micro monoliths, nano services, etc. etc. Microservices is the most popular one. There are some companies that use micro monoliths also. I don't know if you guys use Zerodha or Upstocks, basically trading platforms. Most of the trading platforms are written in micro monoliths. But yeah, other than that, microservices is a standard one. Nano services is an anti-pattern. So like how we discussed design patterns, there are something called as anti-patterns also that you'll probably understand once you go deeper into your design skills. But for now, let it be there. So microservices is something that was a huge revolution in terms of software architecture, where instead of writing everything in one single application, we create smaller applications and combine them so that when I want to scale a single bit of feature, I can scale it. When I want to change a single feature, let's say, for example, right now, CoWIN registration happens through OTP. Tomorrow, let's say that CoWIN registration should happen through password. It's a small change. The feature is same. The feature is still registration. But I want this feature to be changed from OTP based registration to password based registration. So at that time, what would I do? I just go to my microservice, a single chota small microservice which is doing the user registration. I'll just change its implementation and deploy it. Simple. I don't have to touch the entire system at all. My DB is still safe. All my other features are safe. And only this system has been changed. So first thing is configurability, maintainability. This is something called as maintainability. So the maintainability of your product increases with microservices. Then scalability. Now, if I have to scale, I don't have to scale the entire system because all of my system is broken into small services. So I'll just scale that service which has the user registration in it. That's all. So I saved my cost, unnecessary cost. Then configurability. So there are things like workflow and all of that which are involved in microservices. So basically, microservice architecture has solved one of the biggest problems in software industry, that was this fight between cost, efficiency, scalability, usability, etc. So the software architectures have evolved from monolith to microservices. So if you understand why monolith was bad, it's easy for you to understand why people are going to microservices. Today, if you actually observe, according to my knowledge, around 70 to 80% of the software products in this world have already been migrated to microservices. Some of them are still running in monolith. Some of products from Goldman Sachs or maybe JP Morgan, some of the investment banks are still going through monolith because they have very time sensitive information. So they just can't afford to migrate their system. But yeah, most of them have moved to microservices. Maybe in the next 10 years, the new architecture might emerge. Microservices is the thing of the day today, but tomorrow there can be another one, who knows. But yeah, that's what I told you when I spoke about software development, right? Software development should always keep itself refining. The new solutions will emerge. You should be able to migrate. If, let's say, if CoWIN was designed and developed for 100% of the problem, then the refinement, the change, the iteration would not be possible. It is only possible when you design for 80%, implement for 60%, and then leave room for 20% of change. So these are just few things which you as engineers will acquire once you start designing your software systems. And then how do you scale? I already told you. Scaling is multiple. Again, it is architecture dependent. If it is monolith, you can only do vertical scaling. But when it comes to microservices, you can do horizontal and vertical scaling. Now, what is horizontal, what is vertical is again a topic in itself. I just don't want to go deep into it. Consider it as homework. Just take it as homework. Just read about microservices. What is horizontal scaling? What is vertical scaling? Because these things will what make you engineers. Remember that. If you don't know these things, you will just be developers. You'll just be coders. You won't be engineers. For you to be engineers, you should have a holistic view. That is very important. Then there is abstraction. So yeah, so when you speak of scale, the next thing that pops up in anyone's head is cloud. So you might have heard about cloud technology, cloud computing. I cloud computing altogether. I don't know if it's still there in the syllabus. Yeah, cloud computing, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. These are like giants in the software world right now. That is because of abstraction. That is because these guys have come up with the best possible solution for scaling. That is, you give your system to us. It's like saying, let's say I am AWS, and say Mahesh sir or Pawan is kind of developing the software. I'll just tell them, you give your system to me, I'll take care of all of it. I'll scale up whenever it requires. I'll manage the entire DevOps part of it. You just have to tell me what to do, where to do, and what services you need. That's all. So this abstraction in the operations, this abstraction in the scale solution that has been provided by all these cloud providers has been revolutionized, has been revolutionary actually for the software developers all across the world and a lot of software teams as well. That's exactly why you see, Amazon's share going up, skyrocketing. You see Microsoft doing so well. That is because major part of their business comes from AWS, that is Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, GCP. And if you guys are into the Coursera Udemy ecosystem, then you might have seen these advertisements, right? A to Z certified AWS, A to Z Azure, cloud computing course. All of them are this itself. Cloud computing is nothing but abstracted service which gives you multiple facilities for you, a developer, a team, for you to deploy your system and make sure that the DevOps part of it, the operations part of it is handled on its own. As I told you, scaling is not an easy problem to solve. Of course, it has been solved by architectural changes, but it's still one of the tough problems to solve. Scaling, caching, race conditions, all of these are burning software problems even to this day. So some people have solved it to an extent, some have not. We still struggle. All of that is true. But cloud computing, cloud services like AWS and Azure have solved this problem to an extent, but of course, at some cost. When you deploy all of this on a bare metal server, you might have a different cost, but when you deploy it on AWS, you'll have a different cost. But it's good. Like if you want to work on a high scale, it's always suggested that you use cloud computing tools, which of course most of them use. Most of the people actually go for this when it comes to DevOps. Maybe all of this is Latin and Greek for you. Like when I say of microservices, architecture, cloud, AWS, you might not have heard these before. You might not have, you are not even remotely aware of all of these. But I just want to put these words into your head so that whenever you are free, you just go back, take a look at it, and make sure that you have this in your resume. You have this in your head, because these things are extremely important for developers of this day. So yeah, then coder versus engineer, this is very important. I just got this topic because I was taught about this when I was graduating out of my college by my mentors, by my managers in office, and even my professors. I just want to convey the same thing to you guys. It's very different. See, you might be a developer, but for you to be a good engineer, there are multiple things that you have to take care of. Of course, whatever we have discussed till now, maybe problem solving skills, design patterns, and whatever we just discussed, right? All of these are part of engineering. A good developer, so that's why, so my first point is big picture, because big picture. So big picture is when, maybe most of coders are coders who just solve a problem for a given reward. There is a given problem to you, you solve it, you party hard, and you go back home. But when it comes to an engineer, it's important for you to have the big picture in mind. You might be asked to reverse a string. As a coder, you will reverse a string, that's okay. But as an engineer, you should be aware of, okay, where is this reversal of string coming into place? Which project am I working in? Which feature am I working for? Or which feature am I working on? Inside that feature, at which exact point is this string reversal coming? And then you solve a problem under that context. See, you let's say, for example, let's say, okay, let me take an example that you are developing a very there are two things, right? Either you're developing an application which is very close to your system. Maybe you're writing a C program. It's a very ground level program, or you're writing a Java program. Now, the requirement is I can let's say that let's say I have okay, or you might be aware of space complexity and time complexity, right? So let's say I have a use case where I am allowed to use more space, but I can't use more time. Where my space complexity, there is a freedom to it, but time complexity, there is no freedom. But there is a other use case where for me, time complexity is not a problem, but space is a problem. In the sense, when I solve, I can't use more memory. I can use more CPU cycles. There is another problem where I can't use more CPU cycles, but I can use more memory. Now, as an engineer, you will be considerate of all of these factors. But as a coder, you won't be considerate of all of this. The only thing that you need is, okay, I'm given a problem of string reversal. I'll reverse it and give it to you. I'm not worried about whether I'm using inbuilt functions. I'm not using inbuilt functions. What is the time complexity of it? What is the space complexity of it? What feature is this a part of? What application is this a part of? Where is this going to be deployed? And how is this going to perform on the customer end? None of these will be there in a coder's mind, but in an engineer's mind, all of this is very important, extremely important. Your managers, your mentors might tell you that, okay, you know what, you have to develop this feature of adding, deleting, retrieving, updating the user, the CRUD operation on a user. That might be your task, but don't look at it as a developer, look at it as an engineer. There is a reason why you're engineers, right? There is a reason why you have that certificate. There is a reason why you have done your course for 4 years or 6 years, whatever that is. So just pay value to it and make sure that you look at a problem as an engineer and not just a normal developer. That is very important. Then is competitive versus collaborative. So what it means is there is a difference between a coder solving a problem and an engineer solving a problem. When a coder solves a problem, when I say coder, I'm talking about a normal developer, a bare metal developer with no engineering background. When a developer solves a problem, they usually do it for a competitive purpose, a competitive. So basically you're given a problem and you solve a problem and you're done with it. But when an engineer solves a problem, he not only looks at the big picture, but he also looks at what can change in this. Tomorrow, let's say I am working on a feature. Now I moved from this project to that project. Tomorrow, a new developer is going to work on this feature. In that case, your code should be readable from him. You cannot just declare some variables like x, y, z, x equal to y plus z and just finish it off, right? A developer, a coder can do it, but an engineer, a developer should not be able to do it. A developer should write code in such a way that this code is collaborative. When a new engineer or a new developer comes into place, he should be able to understand your code. He or she should be able to make changes to this code. Your code should look pristine and also perform with high efficiency. But for a coder, for a college student, all of this might not be important. But for an engineer, this is very important. Speed, accuracy, quality. I think this is a standard problem everywhere. Either, so your manager just comes to you and says, you know what, I want to develop a CRUD feature for user where you have to do APIs for create, update, retrieval of a user, and I want it to be done in the next 2 hours. Now you can't say no to your manager, of course, or your mentor or whoever you're reporting to, but at the same time, you should not compromise on accuracy as well. Just because you're asked to do it in 2 hours does not mean you compromise on accuracy. Of course, you might not come up with 100% accuracy, but you should at least have decent accuracy. That is very important. Plus the quality, the quality of the solution, the quality of the code, and the quality of the delivery as such. The code, the solution, how configurable it is, how collaborative it is. All of it is very important for an engineer. For a coder, it might not be important. For a college student, it might. Basically, when I say coder, a college student. When I say engineer, a graduate, a developer, who comes up with some degree, who comes up, who basically, comes with a more elegant approach towards development. So speed versus accuracy is very, of course, your managers are much more experienced. They know what amount of time is required for what feature. They'll not give you some unrealistic deadlines and all of that. But even then, whenever a requirement is given to you, just don't concentrate on speed. Don't try to impress anyone by your speed. Try to impress people by your quality. Try to impress people by your accuracy. Try to impress people by the way you work. You might not do it faster. You might take maybe 2 hours more. You might take a day more. But if your solution is of high quality, if your solution is accurate, if there is no rework needed on that, then it's all worth it. So always remember, speed is important for an engineer, but accuracy and quality of your solution at the same time. When I say solution, your code, basically, because since all of us are developers here. Then there is ownership. See, what happens is most developers, most engineers are lacking ownership. What I mean by that is, let's say I am a manager, or say I'm someone who just give who wants a requirement to be fulfilled. So I just come to you and I say, you know what, can you just write an API for creating a user? And you'll say, okay. So you just come up with a create user API. Then I'll say, so what I do, you come to me and then I'll say, okay, let me test this API. So I'll say, I'll give my first name, I'll give my last name, and in email ID, I'll say ABC XYZ. And I'll say create, and it gets created. Now, is it correct or is it wrong? It's correct and it's also wrong, because as a developer, you are asked to develop a feature for user creation. You did it. You are told to have fields like first name, last name, email ID, password, etc. You created them. But what an engineer would do is, engineer would go one step ahead and own this feature. As in, what if I would use this feature tomorrow? I'm not just a developer now. What if I am using this feature tomorrow? He'll also have that perspective in his head and then start developing. First, he'll solve the problem on paper and then he'll start solving it on the code. So when you do that, the first thing that you'll understand is, okay, when I say email should always have a @ in between. It should have a dot and it should have a extension .com, .in, .org, whatever is it. If a string that is entered in this field does not match this pattern, this is wrong. Your manager would not have told you this. Your product manager might not have told you this, but it's your responsibility to go one extra mile. I don't want you to, add some validations, like around 100, 150 validations like you add for password. But just one extra mile, make sure that your solution is elegant, make sure that, this solution is of high quality. And quality comes only when you take ownership of a product. That, okay, creation of user is a feature and I am the owner for it. Anything that happens wrong with it, I'll deal with it. I'll ensure that there is no wrong with it. But if at all there is a mistake, I'll make sure that, I'll make sure that this is of highest quality and there are no problems. That if there are any problems, I'll make sure I fix it on time.